Welcome to Time Before Us, the channel where ancient history breathes again. Before time had a name. Before the first human breath, there existed a world fierce, forgotten, and alive. Creatures of scale and silence, predators wrapped in feathers, titans that shook the earth, lives erased, bones buried beneath eternity. But they are not lost. They are waiting. This is Time Before Us, where prehistoric worlds rise again, and the stories buried in stone finally speak. Wide floodplains, giant horsetail plants clustered near sluggish rivers, and the air was heavy with buzzing insects that looked almost alien. This was not yet the world of dinosaurs, at least not in the way we imagine. Here, in the shadows of the forest, something new was stirring. Among the undergrowth darted small, lightly built animals that looked different from anything else alive. They were the first dinosaurs, not yet rulers, not yet giants, but tiny survivors testing the edges of possibility. And among them was one of the earliest of all, Eoraptor. Eoraptor was no more than a meter long, smaller than a medium-sized dog, with a slender body and long tail for balance. Its skull was narrow, filled with sharp teeth, and its hands bore grasping claws. It wasn't the ferocious king of its world, but rather an opportunist, eating insects, small reptiles, maybe even plants. And yet, hidden within its body was a blueprint that would shape history. Upright legs, hollow bones, and a body built for speed and endurance. Compared to the hulking predators of its time, a raptor looked fragile. The Triassic was full of fearsome creatures like phytosaurs, crocodile-like predators with long toothy jaws that lurked in rivers and swamps. There were also Rausuchians, towering reptilian hunters that could grow up to 20 feet long, with jaws built to crush bone. In a world dominated by such monsters, early dinosaurs were more like background characters than stars. They stayed small, kept to the margins, and survived by being quick, alert, and adaptable. But adaptability is a powerful thing. While other creatures specialized, becoming huge, slow, or locked into particular ways of life, dinosaurs had something different. Their unique body structure gave them flexibility. They could run faster, breathe more efficiently, and evolve into new forms more quickly. In the quiet spaces of the Triassic forests, these little dinosaurs were planting the seeds of a dynasty. Imagine following an Eoraptor as it moves carefully through the ferns. It pauses often, head tilted, bright eyes scanning the world for danger. A shadow flickers across the forest floor, a predator passing nearby. The little dinosaur freezes, every muscle tense, heart pounding, until the shadow fades. Only then does it move again, darting into the safety of thicker vegetation. This is survival on a knife's edge. Every day, every meal, every step could mean the difference between life and death. But dinosaurs weren't just hunters or prey, they were explorers. Slowly, they began to spread. From small beginnings in what is now South America, they wandered across the vast supercontinent of Pangaea. At that time, all the world's landmasses were fused into one colossal expanse, stretching from pole to pole. There were no oceans to block their path, no mountain ranges too tall to cross. With every generation, dinosaurs pushed a little farther outward, following rivers, forests, and the changing seasons. Among them was Herrerasaurus, another early dinosaur, larger and more formidable than Eoraptor, reaching about 15 feet in length. It was one of the first true predators in the dinosaur family. Its sharp teeth and strong jaws marked it as a hunter capable of taking down larger prey. Yet even Herrerasaurus was still just one experiment in the early story of dinosaurs. Some lineages would vanish completely. Others would adapt, branch out, and thrive in ways no one could have predicted. The remarkable thing about this chapter in Earth's history is how quiet it was. The rise of dinosaurs wasn't sudden or explosive. It didn't begin with giant beasts thundering across the land. It began with small, almost fragile creatures taking tentative steps through fern-filled forests. Their footprints were light, easily erased by wind and rain. And yet, those faint tracks would lead to an empire that would dominate the earth for over 160 million years. Think about that for a moment. The very first dinosaurs were underdogs. They weren't built to overpower their rivals immediately. They weren't the top predators or the largest plant eaters. They survived not by strength, but by persistence, by slipping into niches that others ignored, by enduring when other species collapsed. And when the Triassic period ended, with its waves of extinctions that swept many of their competitors away, dinosaurs were ready. They stepped forward to fill the empty spaces. In the hush of those Triassic forests, evolution was writing the opening lines of one of Earth's greatest stories. It's almost poetic to imagine a tiny dinosaur crouched in the ferns, unaware of its destiny, while all around it the world was reshaping itself. Volcanic eruptions split the sky with fire. Rivers shifted course. Forests grew and died. And in that ever-changing world, the light-boned, fast-moving, resilient little dinosaurs endured. What's beautiful about this beginning is how it reminds us that greatness often starts in the smallest, quietest ways. The dinosaurs who would one day give rise to giants like Brachiosaurus and T-Rex started out as creatures you might have walked past without a second glance. Their survival was uncertain. Their path was anything but guaranteed. And yet, they carried within them the potential for everything that would follow. So the first footsteps in the ferns weren't thunderous. They weren't dramatic. They were light, cautious, almost fragile. But step by step, they built the path toward an age of giants. And as the Triassic gave way to the Jurassic, those quiet survivors were ready to rise. Chapter 2. The Giants. Of the plains, picture an endless plain, stretching farther than the eye can see. The ground is soft with layers of ancient soil, dotted with groves of cycads and ferns, while clusters of towering conifers rise like sentinels in the distance. The air is warm, heavy, and filled with the low hum of insects. Overhead, the sky is pale blue, streaked with drifting clouds. And then a shadow passes, not from a predator's wings, but from the colossal shape of a long-necked giant moving slowly across the horizon. This is the age of sauropods, the largest land animals ever to walk the earth. Their sheer size feels almost impossible to imagine. Some stretched longer than a basketball court, others stood as tall as a 5-story building. They were living mountains, herds of moving landscapes that shaped everything around them. And unlike the fierce hunters that often steal the spotlight, sauropods lived a quieter existence. They were gentle grazers, spending their lives in a calm rhythm of walking, feeding, and moving again. Take Diplodocus, for instance. With its impossibly long neck and whip-like tail, it was a creature built for efficiency. It could stand in one spot and sweep its head in wide arcs, stripping entire trees of leaves without taking a step. Imagine a creature as long as 3 buses lined up, yet so graceful in its slow, deliberate movements that the earth itself barely trembled. When an entire herd moved together across the floodplains, it must have looked like a river of giants flowing steadily across the land. Lives of these sauropods were dictated by food. To sustain their enormous bodies, they ate constantly, perhaps hundreds of pounds of plants each day. Picture them at sunrise, scattered across the plains, necks stretching high to nibble at treetops, while others lowered their heads to sweep up ferns and shrubs. Their chewing wasn't delicate or refined. They swallowed leaves whole, relying on massive digestive systems to do the work. Inside their bellies, fermentation chambers churned endlessly, breaking down tough plant fibers into energy. In many ways, their stomachs were just as mighty as their size. And yet, despite their enormity, sauropods weren't clumsy. Their bodies were marvels of natural engineering. Their bones were hollowed out like the struts of a bridge, strong yet lightweight enough to support such vast size. Their necks worked like living cranes, balancing effortlessly with tails that counterweighted every movement. Each step was cushioned by padded feet, distributing their weight so evenly that their footprints often pressed only a few inches into soft ground. It's humbling to think that such massive creatures could move with such quiet grace. Herd life gave them more than companionship. It gave them safety. While a single sauropod was formidable simply by size, a group moving together became nearly untouchable. Predators, even large ones, thought twice before approaching. Imagine being a predator the size of a lion and staring up at a wall of legs thicker than tree trunks. A misplaced step could crush you instantly. For the smaller dinosaurs of the plains, living near sauropods may have felt like moving alongside mobile fortresses. Still, even these giants had vulnerabilities. Young sauropods, newly hatched from eggs no bigger than a football, were tiny compared to their towering parents. They grew quickly, some species doubling in size every few months, but during that fragile time, they were easy targets. Carnivorous dinosaurs, packs of smaller hunters, even giant crocodiles lurking in rivers, all posed constant threats. Picture a hatchling no taller than your knee, darting through ferns, trying desperately to keep up with its colossal mother. Survival depended on staying close, hidden, and moving fast. Even the simple act of feeding sometimes altered their world. Herds stripping forests bare before moving on, reshaping ecosystems in their wake. In a sense, sauropods were ecosystem engineers, their constant appetite creating the very landscapes they roamed. Imagine being there at dusk. The sky glows with deep orange light as the sun sinks low. A herd of Brachiosaurus, taller than any other, moves across the horizon, their silhouettes stark against the fading sky. The ground vibrates faintly under their steps, not with violence, but with rhythm, like a heartbeat of the ancient plains. Birds, newly evolved from small feathered dinosaurs, flutter among the branches nearby, chirping as they settle in for the night. Around the giants, the smaller creatures of the Mesozoic world go about their business, mammals scurrying in the underbrush, tiny dinosaurs darting between ferns. And towering above it all, the sauropods move calmly, unhurried, unchallenged. There's something soothing about their presence. Unlike the predators, whose lives were full of tension and chase, sauropods lived by patience. They did not sprint, they did not stalk, they did not roar. They simply endured, season after season, year after year, generation after generation. And through their endurance, they became the dominant shapers of the land. When you think about it, there's almost a lesson in their existence. Power didn't come from aggression, but from persistence. Survival wasn't about being the fastest or fiercest, but about moving steadily, finding what you need, and adapting when times grew harsh. That's why sauropods thrived for over 100 million years. They weren't accidents of evolution. They were its most enduring success, and though their time eventually ended, their presence still lingers in the rocks beneath our feet. Fossilized footprints stretch across ancient riverbeds, silent evidence of long-forgotten journeys. Some trails extend for miles, showing herds moving in the same direction, perhaps during a migration, perhaps in search of new feeding grounds. Each step pressed into stone is a frozen heartbeat of the giants who once ruled the plains. So when you imagine dinosaurs, don't think only of teeth and claws. Think of the calm giants, the herds that moved like rivers of life across ancient landscapes. Think of the gentle rhythm of their days, walking, feeding, resting, and moving again beneath skies older than memory. In their quiet way, They were the true rulers of their world. The plains belonged to them. And in their footsteps, life would never be the same again. Chapter 3. The Feathered Ones. When most people imagine dinosaurs, the picture that comes to mind is usually the same: scaly skin, sharp claws, and reptilian roars echoing through prehistoric jungles. For decades, that was the story told in textbooks, movies, and museum displays. Dinosaurs were painted in shades of green and gray, their hides as rough and bare as crocodiles. But science has a way of surprising us, and one of the most gentle, enchanting revelations of all is this: many dinosaurs were covered not in scales alone, but in feathers. It sounds almost whimsical, doesn't it? Feathers belong to birds. To think of a creature like Velociraptor, a name that still makes us shiver, wearing a cloak of delicate feathers seems like a contradiction. But this is one of those times when reality is even more fascinating than fiction. The story begins in the rocks of northeastern China, in a region known as Liaoning. Here, in fine-grained fossil beds formed by ancient volcanic ash, paleontologists uncovered something extraordinary: dinosaurs preserved so perfectly that even the soft tissues, feathers, skin, and sometimes stomach contents remained visible. Suddenly, the image of dinosaurs shifted forever. Tiny raptors, long-tailed hunters, and even early relatives of tyrannosaurs were revealed with coats of fine, downy feathers. Some had simple filaments like soft fuzz. Others had more complex, branching feathers, the kind you'd recognize on birds today. Take Sinosauropteryx, one of the first feathered dinosaurs ever discovered. Barely larger than a chicken, it scurried through its ancient world with a body cloaked in a halo of ginger-colored feathers. Yes, ginger. Fossil analysis showed that not only did this little predator have feathers, but those feathers carried pigment, revealing a rusty orange hue with bands of white striping along its tail. For the first time, we weren't just imagining what dinosaurs looked like, we were seeing their true colors. Feathers weren't just decoration. They served purposes long before flight ever entered the picture. For small dinosaurs like Sinosauropteryx, feathers likely kept them warm, trapping heat against their bodies in chilly climates. For others, feathers may have been used for display: a flash of color to attract mates, or bold patterns to scare off rivals. Picture a raptor spreading its arms wide, feathers fanning out not unlike a peacock's display, shimmering in sunlight as it strutted before potential mates. But feathers were also tools of survival. Some provided camouflage, blending dinosaurs into forests and plains. Imagine a feathered predator crouching low among ferns, its mottled colors melting into the shadows, waiting for an unsuspecting lizard to pass by. Others may have used feathers to shade their eggs while brooding, spreading their arms gently across nests to regulate temperature. This tender, almost bird-like behavior connects them to modern creatures in ways we never expected. And then, of course, there's the question of flight. Not all feathered dinosaurs could fly. In fact, most couldn't. But among them were remarkable experiments with the skies. Microraptor, for example, was a tiny four-winged dinosaur with feathers not only on its arms, but also on its legs. Picture it gliding through prehistoric forests, leaping from branch to branch like a living kite, its glossy feathers shimmering in dappled sunlight. It wasn't a master of the skies like modern birds, but it was a bold step toward a new frontier. From there, the line between dinosaur and bird becomes beautifully blurred. Archaeopteryx, often called the first bird, was feathered head to toe, with wings that could carry it in short bursts of flight. But look closely, and you'll see it was still every bit a dinosaur, with teeth in its mouth, claws on its wings, and a long bony tail. Evolution didn't flip a switch from dinosaur to bird. Instead, it was a slow, graceful dance across millions of years, with feathers as the bridge between the two worlds, and perhaps the most magical realization of all is that dinosaurs didn't truly vanish. When the great extinction ended the reign Of the giants, their feathered descendants survived. Every sparrow, every pigeon, every hawk you see today is living proof of that survival. The birds singing in trees outside your window are in fact dinosaurs, the last chapter in a story that began with tiny, feathered hunters darting through ferns. There's something unexpectedly comforting in this knowledge. The mighty thunder lizards may be gone, but their legacy didn't disappear. It transformed, softened, and adapted. Dinosaurs are not just relics of stone in museums. They are alive all around us, fluttering in gardens, wheeling across the sky, singing at dawn. Think about that the next time you see a bird lift gracefully into the air. That motion, the flapping of wings, the shimmer of feathers, is a movement first tested by dinosaurs. Every feather is a thread connecting the present to a world long past. And perhaps that's why feathered dinosaurs feel so magical in bedtime stories. They remind us that evolution isn't just about endings, it's about continuities, about the ways life finds to keep moving forward. From the soft rust-colored fluff of Sinosauropteryx to the brilliant wing feathers of Archaeopteryx, from the forests of the Jurassic to the sparrows in your backyard, feathers carry whispers of an ancient world that never fully faded. So as you imagine dinosaurs tonight, don't picture them all as bare-skinned beasts. Instead, let your mind wander through prehistoric forests where bright plumes flashed in sunlight, where tiny creatures with wings of shadow leapt from tree to tree, and where the boundary between dinosaur and bird was blurred into beauty. Feathered ones weren't just survivors, they were dreamers of the sky. Chapter 4. Ocean Shadows. Close your eyes and imagine standing on the edge of an ancient shoreline. The waves roll in with a slow, steady rhythm, foaming against sand that has never known human footprints. The air is heavy with salt and warmth, and somewhere offshore, a shadow moves beneath the surface. At first you might think it's a whale or a massive fish, but as the shape glides closer, you realize it is something altogether stranger. A creature with a long, narrow jaw bristling with teeth, 4 powerful flippers, and eyes as large as lanterns. This is not a dinosaur, not exactly. This is one of the ocean reptiles that ruled the seas while dinosaurs ruled the land. While the land thundered with the footsteps of giants, the seas were their own kingdoms, home to reptiles every bit as impressive as the dinosaurs above. Among them were plesiosaurs with swan-like necks, mosasaurs with serpent-like bodies, and ichthyosaurs shaped like dolphins, but with teeth built for slicing through prey. Together, they formed a world of ocean shadows, silent hunters gliding beneath the waves, their movements as graceful as they were deadly. Dwelling reptiles that had returned to the water, their legs transformed into flippers, their bodies reshaped by millions of years of adaptation. When they surfaced to breathe, they exhaled through nostrils. Atop their heads, spraying mist into the air, reminders that even ocean rulers still carried the breath of land animals. Then there were the plesiosaurs. Imagine an animal with a barrel-shaped body, 4 strong flippers beating like wings, and a neck so long it seemed to go on forever. Some stretched over 20 feet, their slender necks weaving through schools of fish like serpents. At the end of that neck was a small head, jaws lined with sharp teeth perfect for snaring prey. They moved with a kind of slow majesty, their flippers propelling them in wide sweeping strokes. It's easy to picture them as the source of old sailor legends, their outlines surfacing in misty waters, mistaken for sea serpents or lake monsters. And then, rising later in the Cretaceous, came the true titans of the sea, the mosasaurs. Unlike the long-necked plesiosaurs, these were short-necked, Powerfully built predators that looked like monstrous lizards crossed with crocodiles. Some grew longer than 50 feet. Their jaws could snap shut with bone-crushing force, and their double-hinged skulls allowed them to swallow prey nearly whole. Imagine a mosasaur ambushing a giant turtle, or even another marine reptile, thrashing its victim with terrifying strength. When one of these leviathans rose toward the surface, the ocean itself seemed to shift around it. The oceans of the Mesozoic weren't quiet places. They teemed with life, much of it strange by modern standards. Giant ammonites, relatives of squid, drifted with spiral shells as large as a human. Schools of fish glimmered in silver curtains, scattering at the first shadow of a predator. Enormous sharks prowled deeper waters. Even flying reptiles like pterosaurs skimmed the waves from above, diving for fish with wings spread wide. Every level of the ocean was alive, from surface to abyss, and the marine reptiles ruled them all. What makes these ocean shadows so fascinating is how different their world feels from that of land dinosaurs. On land, survival often meant speed, strength, or armor. In the sea, it was about grace, efficiency, and the ability to vanish into silence. Predators like mosasaurs relied on ambush, rising from below with sudden bursts of power. Plesiosaurs used their long necks to strike without warning, their bodies hidden while their heads reached out like striking snakes. And ichthyosaurs sped through the water in coordinated hunts, much like modern pods of dolphins. Imagine drifting with them at dusk, when the last light of the sun filters down in shafts of gold across the waves. Beneath you, shapes move like living shadows, outlines blurred in the deepening blue. A plesiosaur glides past, its long neck curving gracefully before vanishing into darkness. Farther below, an ichthyosaur streaks past with a burst of speed, chasing fish that scatter like silver sparks. Then, from deeper still, a massive shape begins to rise, the unmistakable bulk of a mosasaur, its jaws opening wide as it engulfs its prey in a sudden explosion of power. And then, silence again. As the ocean swallows its ruler back into the depths, there's something calming about the idea of these ocean realms. Even with predators so fierce, the rhythm of the sea is eternal. Steady, almost soothing. Waves roll, tides shift, and life goes on in cycles as old as the earth itself. The marine reptiles weren't chaotic monsters. They were part of that rhythm. They hunted, they fed, they lived, and they died, woven into the fabric of the sea. Just as whales and sharks are today. And in a way, they remind us of how adaptable life truly is. These creatures began as land animals, crawling on 4 legs, breathing air beneath open skies. Over millions of years, they returned to the water, reshaping themselves into forms perfectly suited for a different world. It's as if nature whispered, "Try again," and life answered with sleek swimmers, long-necked gliders, and ocean giants. Their shadows may have vanished long ago, but their echoes remain in every dolphin that leaps, every sea turtle that glides, every creature that makes the ocean its home. So when you think of dinosaurs, don't just look to the forests and plains. Remember the seas, where shadows larger than buses slipped silently through the waves. Picture those ancient oceans at twilight, glowing softly under fading light, filled with movements both gentle and fierce. The land may have belonged to dinosaurs, but the seas had rulers of their own, and in the hush of the ocean's embrace, their stories still drift with the tides. Chapter 5. The Forest Watchers step into a forest from the age of dinosaurs. The ground is soft with fallen ferns, the air heavy with warmth and mist, and above, giant conifers stretch into the sky like living towers. Sunlight filters down in shifting shafts, turning the forest floor into a place of shadows and golden glow. You take a step, and a twig cracks. Suddenly, silence falls. Something is watching. Not all dinosaurs were thundering giants or ocean hunters. Some made their homes in the stillness of forests, creatures that relied not on size or strength, but on sight, patience, and silence. These were the watchers, small to medium-sized dinosaurs, who thrived by staying alert, reading every shift of the trees, every flicker of movement. To live in these forests meant survival through awareness. Among them were the ornithopods, light-footed grazers with keen eyes and twitching ears. They fed in groups, always on alert for danger. Picture them standing in clearings, heads down to nibble ferns, then snapping upright at the faintest rustle. They were the deer of their time, nervous, fast, and always half prepared to flee. One set of eyes could miss a predator, but a dozen? Rarely. Herds meant safety, and safety meant survival. Then there were the small, bird-like troodontids. With large eyes adapted for low light, they were true forest watchers. Their brains were proportionally larger than most dinosaurs, giving them a level of alertness beyond simple instinct. Imagine one perched on a fallen log, head tilted, pupils wide, listening for the faint crunch of a predator's footfall. In the half-light of dusk, their gaze would pierce the shadows. For them, the forest was alive with signals, a shifting branch, the hush of insects going quiet, the rhythm of wind through the canopy. Other watchers moved higher, into the trees themselves. Some early feathered dinosaurs were small and agile, using claws and feathers to scramble into branches. From above, they looked down at the world below, their sharp vision scanning for insects, small prey, or the approach of danger. They may have glided from tree to tree, watching not just the ground but the sky above as well. To them, the forest was three-dimensional, not just a floor to walk on, but a labyrinth of branches, trunks, and hidden pathways. But watching wasn't only about avoiding danger. Sometimes it was about becoming the danger. Predators, too, were watchers. Think of a small dromaeosaur, crouched low in undergrowth, eyes fixed on a herd of grazing ornithopods. Every muscle is still, every breath controlled. For an hour, it may remain unmoving, waiting for the right moment. The forest rewards patience, and the hunter that could watch longest often fed best. Even the giants had their role. Long-necked sauropods, towering above the canopy, were watchers in their own way. From such heights, they could see far across the landscape, glimpsing movement no small animal could. They were less concerned with predators, few dared attack them. But their awareness gave them a calm command of the forest. They shifted slowly, feeding high where no others could reach, their long necks swaying like living watchtowers among the trees. Imagine walking deeper into this ancient forest at twilight. The air cools, the shadows deepen, and the chorus of insects rises. From somewhere above, the cry of a pterosaur echoes faintly. All around, unseen eyes are fixed on you, ornithopods raising their heads in unison, troodontids peering from thickets, feathered dinosaurs flitting through branches. You don't see them at first, but you feel them, the weight of countless gazes. In this world, to survive was to watch, and to be watched. There's a stillness here, but not emptiness. Every rustle carries meaning. A branch snapping underfoot could mean the approach of a predator. A sudden hush in the insect chorus could mean a shadow passing above. To live in this forest was to live in tune with its signals, each creature attuned to the rhythms of its world. And those who ignored the signs rarely lasted long. In a sense, these forest watchers mirror modern animals. Think of deer in a meadow, their ears flicking constantly. Think of owls, sitting motionless in twilight, their eyes unblinking as they track the faintest stir of prey. The Mesozoic forests weren't so different. Awareness was as much a weapon as claws or teeth, and those who mastered it flourished. As night fully settles, the forest shifts again. The watchers of the day retreat, and others emerge. Nocturnal dinosaurs, their eyes wide and adapted for the dark, step lightly among the trees. They are guided not just by sight, but by hearing and smell, senses sharpened by eons of living in shadows. The forest at night is another kind of stage, lit not by sun, but by moon and starlight. Yet even here, The Watchers rule. Think also of the forest, where survival belonged to the patient, the alert, the unseen. Think of the ones who thrived by pausing, listening, and watching. In their stillness lies a different kind of power, one that shaped entire worlds of life. In the shadows of ancient trees, the forest had its giants, yes, but it also had its watchers. Chapter 6, The Desert's Voice. The desert is silence. At first, it seems empty, an ocean of sand, rippling dunes, rocks cracked by heat, and skies so wide they stretch forever. The sun blazes down, and the air shimmers with heat. No water, no shelter, no shade. Yet listen closely, and the desert has a voice. A whisper in the wind, a rhythm in shifting sands, a heartbeat beneath the surface. Long ago, in the age of dinosaurs, this was no lifeless wasteland. It was alive, and its inhabitants learned to endure, adapt, and even thrive where others would perish. Picture a herd of dinosaurs crossing the sands at dawn. Their feet press patterns into the dunes, prints swallowed quickly by the wind. These are not the lush forests or fertile valleys where most life gathered. This is survival pared down to its rawest form. Every step is measured, every breath costly. To live in the desert meant being clever, resourceful, and tuned to the faintest signals of change. Some dinosaurs evolved to handle scarcity. Small, lightweight species scurried across the dunes, able to find shelter in burrows or beneath rocks. Their bones suggest quick metabolisms, meaning they could extract energy from little food. They didn't need much to survive. Larger species may have migrated, following hidden rivers and seasonal rains, much like elephants today cross barren savannas in search of waterholes. The desert's voice guided them, the distant smell of moisture, the sight of storm clouds. Gathering at the horizon, the tremor of thunder beneath the sand. There were predators too, lean and fast, sculpted by hunger. They relied not on abundance but on timing, waiting at dry riverbeds where herbivores came to drink after rare storms. They were the shadows of the desert, shaped by patience and scarcity. Imagine one crouched near a shrinking pool, still as stone, the sound of its breathing lost in the wind. A thirsty dinosaur approaches, lowering its head, unaware of the hunter until it is too late. But the desert's most powerful voice came from the sky and the earth itself. Wind carved the land into strange shapes, cliffs, arches, and canyons that seemed alive with echoes. Each gust told a story, of dunes shifting, of sand swallowing old trails, of storms building. For dinosaurs, these voices were guides. A sudden stillness might warn of danger. A shift in the wind might carry the smell of water or the scent of another herd miles away. Some deserts were not always dry. Fossil evidence shows that many arid lands of the dinosaur age shifted between wet and dry cycles. A place that today looks barren once held temporary lakes where life exploded after rains. Dinosaurs would have known these rhythms, waiting out the silence of drought until the desert sang again with frogs, insects, and blooming plants. The desert's voice was one of patience. Endure, and life will return. Think of the small desert dwellers, perhaps feathered for insulation against scorching days and freezing nights. They hunted insects, seeds, or small reptiles, their lives balanced between extremes. They were quick to hide, quick to move, and quick to seize fleeting opportunities. The desert favored speed, not just in running, but in reacting to change. Then, there were the giants, lumbering across sand like ships on an endless sea. They were out of place, yet somehow they managed. Their survival meant movement, walking far, searching constantly, never resting too long in one place. The desert's voice was always calling them onward. At night, the desert changed. The heat fled, replaced by cold air that bit through feathers and scales alike. Stars blanketed the sky in breathtaking numbers, and the land lay still, waiting. But even then, the desert whispered, insects clicked. Small nocturnal dinosaurs rustled in the sand, leaving delicate trails. Predators prowled under starlight, their silhouettes cutting across the dunes. The desert's voice at night was softer, more secretive, but no less alive. To us, deserts may seem desolate, but for dinosaurs, they were stages of survival. Every sound mattered: the rush of wind, the crack of a dry branch, the hiss of shifting sand. To live here was to listen, to feel, to endure. Those who ignored the desert's voice didn't last long. And so, as you imagine these ancient deserts, don't think of silence as emptiness. Think of it as presence. The desert speaks through every grain of sand carried on the wind, through every footprint erased by storms, through the persistence of creatures that called it home. The desert was harsh, yes, but also eternal. It demanded respect, and those who listened carefully to its voice could find life where others found only death. The desert never truly sleeps. Its voice still whispers, carried in the wind over ancient dunes that once echoed with the footsteps of dinosaurs. Chapter 7. The Insect Chorus. Close your eyes and step into the ancient world. Before you hear the heavy footsteps of dinosaurs or the rustle of giant ferns, another sound greets you first. A chorus, high-pitched, endless, and layered like a living orchestra. It is the song of insects. The insect chorus has been the soundtrack of Earth for hundreds of millions of years. Long before the first dinosaurs walked the land, insects were already singing, buzzing, and droning beneath the canopy of forests and across open plains. By the time the great reptiles ruled, this soundscape was as familiar to them as traffic is to us today. It filled every dawn, every dusk, every humid night with a ceaseless pulse. Imagine a warm evening in the Jurassic. The sky glows with the last light of the sun, and the forest begins to darken. As shadows stretch, the air comes alive. Cicada-like insects hum with vibrating wings, their calls echoing off giant conifers. Beetles click and scrape, producing rhythms as they move across bark. Grasshopper relatives leap through ferns, releasing chirps as their legs rub together. Each species has its own note, its own rhythm, blending into a wall of sound that is not noise, but music. Dinosaurs, big and small, lived inside this ocean of sound. For a small predator creeping through undergrowth, the chorus was both camouflage and obstacle. It masked its own footsteps, but also concealed those of prey. To hunt, it needed to listen past the constant drone, to filter signal from the endless background of wings and legs. For plant eaters, the insect chorus could be a warning system. A sudden silence meant something had disturbed the forest. Creatures froze when the music stopped, because predators might be near. Insects didn't just sing, they shaped the world. They pollinated the earliest flowering plants that appeared in the Cretaceous. They recycled dead leaves and dung, clearing the forest floor. They burrowed, aerating soil and spreading nutrients. Every bite of green a dinosaur took, every mouthful of fruit or seed, was influenced by insects working quietly behind the scenes. Their chorus was more than sound. It was life itself, humming in the background. On warm nights, the insect chorus swelled to its peak. Imagine a sauropod resting near a lake, its long neck draped over its body. Around it, frogs croak, but louder still are the insects, buzzing clouds that rise into the humid air, clicking wings flashing in moonlight. Moths, some the size of modern birds, flutter past its head. Beetles crawl across its thick skin. Harmless passengers. The air is alive with vibration, so constant it becomes the very definition of night. Dinosaurs didn't live in silence. They lived inside an eternal concert. There were dangers too. Some insects bit and stung, piercing dinosaur hide to draw blood. Swarms could harass even the largest creatures, driving them toward water or shade. Fossilized amber has preserved ancient mosquitoes, midges, and biting flies, some perhaps carrying parasites just like today. The insect chorus was not always a gentle lullaby. Sometimes it was a warning, an irritation, or a source of disease. Yet the chorus also carried beauty. Some insects may have produced sounds to attract mates, filling the night with competing calls. Picture a clearing where dozens of cricket-like creatures sing, each male trying to outdo the others. The sound rises and falls like waves, filling the ancient forest with rhythms dinosaurs would have known well. For us, these calls are nostalgic, reminders of summer nights. For them, it was simply the sound of home. Dinosaurs themselves may have reacted to these sounds. A small, feathered hunter could have used sudden shifts in insect calls as a cue, stalking prey when the chorus faltered. A herd of plant eaters might have grown restless if the insect song went still, sensing danger. In the silence, insects, without knowing it, became part of the communication web of the ancient world. And what of the young dinosaurs? Hatchlings breaking from their eggs would have heard this chorus before they ever saw the sky. From inside the shell, vibrations of cicadas and crickets would have resonated through the earth around them. Their first moments of life were not met by silence, but by music, the constant hum of the insect world. To them, this chorus was the most natural thing of all. To escape. The insect chorus could shift from gentle background to deafening roar in a heartbeat. The insect chorus also connected day to night. During sunlight hours, bees, beetles, and dragonflies filled the air with a lighter hum, buzzing as they moved between flowers and trees. At dusk, the singers of the night awoke, and the rhythm deepened. Life on Earth has always had cycles of sound, and in the age of dinosaurs, insects were the keepers of that rhythm. Amber, the golden resin of ancient trees, has given us a glimpse of this world. Trapped inside our delicate wings, frozen mid-beat, legs poised as if ready to strum. Some even preserve tiny air sacs that may have vibrated to produce calls. These fossils are silent now, but they tell us that the insect chorus once rang across every continent. From swampy jungles to dry plains. When we imagine dinosaurs, we often picture silence broken only by roars. But that was never the reality. They lived surrounded by endless sound. Insects filled every pause, every quiet moment, with their ceaseless symphony. It was the sound of survival, the sound of life multiplied 1,000,000 times over. And perhaps, if you listen closely on a summer night today, you can hear echoes of that same chorus. The crickets in your backyard, the buzz of cicadas in the trees, the hum of wings around a lamp, all are threads stretching back to the time of dinosaurs. The insect chorus has never stopped. It has only changed singers. The world of dinosaurs was never quiet. It was alive with voices, and the smallest, most constant, most enduring of those voices belonged to insects. Chapter 8. Night voices. When the sun dipped below the horizon of prehistoric Earth, a different kind of world awoke. The glowing sky gave way to darkness, but night was never silent. Instead, it came alive with voices, subtle, strange, and haunting. These were the night voices, the sounds that filled the ancient hours after dinosaurs and their world settled. Under the stars. Imagine standing in a late Cretaceous forest as twilight fades. The last light flickers across ferns, and the air cools with the loss of the sun. The daytime calls of birds and buzzing insects soften, replaced by deeper, slower tones. The world shifts into another register. A rustle in the undergrowth, a low croak from a swamp, the wings of a bat-like reptile cutting the air. The night has its own orchestra, one that thrives in shadow. Nocturnal dinosaurs were a part of this world. Small, keen-eyed hunters such as Truden, with unusually large pupils, prowled the edges of moonlit clearings. Their calls may have been soft chirps or clicks, communicating with each other as they moved. To hear Truden at night was to hear the faint whisper of a predator coordinating in the dark. Prey animals listened carefully, every sound a warning, every silence a signal to freeze. The voices of night were not only predators and prey. Frogs croaked loudly in marshlands, some of them larger than any alive today, their deep-throated songs resonating across still water. Reptiles hissed, insects buzzed, and primitive mammals squeaked and rustled through the leaves, all part of a layered composition. These sounds merged into an atmosphere that was both calming and unsettling, a reminder that life never truly rested. Night voices were also shaped by the landscape. In an open plain, the calls carried far, echoing under the stars. In dense forests, the soundscape was muffled, broken into fragments by thick vegetation. Along riverbanks, the chorus of amphibians dominated, while deserts filled with the scratching of nocturnal lizards. Each ecosystem produced its own version of the nocturnal soundtrack, a sound unique to place and time. Fireflies and glowing insects may have added another dimension. Imagine tiny lights drifting above swamps, each glow paired with a faint fluttering. Sound. Dinosaurs watching from the shadows would have seen not just darkness, but a sky speckled with living stars. And each flash carried a voice, a pattern, a signal. The night was as much about sight as sound, and the two were often intertwined. Night was also when some of the strangest calls filled the air. Pterosaurs, relatives of dinosaurs that ruled the skies, may have used piercing shrieks or resonant bellows to find each other across the dark. Fossil evidence shows they had elaborate crests, some hollow and shaped like sound chambers. These crests may have amplified their calls, producing eerie tones that echoed through the night sky. To hear such a sound would have been unforgettable. Like a trumpet wailing across the heavens, the night voices were not only a soundtrack for survival, but a rhythm of life. Many dinosaurs adapted their behavior to these sounds. Large herbivores resting in groups stirred uneasily when the night chorus suddenly shifted. A lull in insect hums or frog calls often signaled an approaching predator. In this way, the nocturnal soundscape acted as a natural alarm system, an invisible shield of awareness. For hatchlings and juveniles, these sounds were their first lullabies. Imagine a nest of tiny dinosaurs huddled beneath their mother, drifting to sleep as crickets and croaks wove through the night. The young learned to distinguish familiar voices from dangerous ones, comfort from threat. For them, the night chorus was education as much as environment. Sometimes the night voices swelled to overwhelming intensity. In tropical regions, the humidity amplified insect songs until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Frogs croaked in unison, a rolling wave of sound, while unseen creatures moved through the underbrush. For a dinosaur listening, this wall of noise could be both comfort, proof that life thrived, and terror, because silence within it meant sudden danger. The moon, too, influenced the voices of night. On full moon nights, visibility improved, and many nocturnal animals grew bolder. Their calls increased, echoing farther into the darkness. Predators used the moonlight to hunt, while prey relied more on sound to sense threats. On new moon nights, when darkness was total, the voices often shifted to lower tones, more cautious, more secretive. The night spoke differently depending on the sky above. For us, these sounds are gone, carried away by millions of years. But their echoes survive in modern ecosystems. The chirp of crickets, the croak of frogs, the calls of nocturnal birds, all of these are direct descendants of the ancient night voices. Listening to them today is like hearing a faint, faded version of the music that once guided dinosaurs through the dark. Amber and fossils tell us fragments of this story. Tiny insects frozen in time show wings built for vibrating, legs shaped for stridulation, the production of sound. Hollow bones of pterosaurs reveal structures designed to amplify air. Even the skulls of certain dinosaurs suggest resonating chambers, hinting at calls we may never hear again. These remains whisper of a world where the night was never quiet, where life found endless ways to sing in the dark. Perhaps the most haunting thought is this: silence in the age of dinosaurs was rare. Day and night alike were filled with sound. When we imagine a Mesozoic night, we should not picture stillness under starlight. We should imagine the restless whisper of creatures unseen, the chorus of insects and frogs, the distant cry of winged reptiles, the cautious rustle of mammals, and the low calls of predators moving through the shadows. The night voices were a reminder that life never ceased, even under the cover of darkness. They were the invisible presence that surrounded every dinosaur, every moment of every night, a living symphony that marked the passing of hours. And though we cannot hear them now, we carry their legacy. Step outside on a summer evening, listen to the chorus of insects, the croaks of frogs, the distant calls of night birds, and you are closer to the world of dinosaurs. Then you realize the night voices have never vanished. They have only changed their players. Chapter 9. Dawn Chorus. The darkest hours of night slowly gave way to the faintest glow on the horizon. In the age of dinosaurs, the dawn was more than the coming of light. It was a signal, a shift, and the beginning of a daily performance. As the first colors painted the sky, the prehistoric world filled with sound. This was the Dawn Chorus, a layered symphony that echoed across plains, forests, and swamps, announcing the start of another day. Imagine a Cretaceous landscape in the earliest morning. The ground is still damp with night dew, mist drifts over ferns, and the air carries a coolness that will soon vanish under the rising sun. For a brief moment, the world holds its breath. Then, one by one, voices emerge. A call from a bird-like dinosaur in the trees, answered by another farther away. The air stirs with wings, footsteps, and the rumble of herds. The silence of night breaks apart, replaced by life and motion. The dawn chorus likely began with the smallest creatures. Insects, already awake, filled the air with clicks, hums, and buzzes. Their rhythm set the background, the constant pulse of life. Frogs joined in from the water's edge, their calls bouncing like drums across the swamp. Then came the birds. Not birds as we know them today, but feathered dinosaurs with primitive songs, sharp whistles, and rhythmic calls. They were the early composers of morning sound, their voices spreading through the canopy and across the plains. Wave that carried for miles. This was not only communication but a declaration. The herd was awake, strong, and present. Predators joined in too, though their voices were different. A distant roar from a tyrannosaur might ripple across the land, not constant but occasional, a reminder of its presence. Smaller predators, like dromaeosaurs, may have used sharp barks or cackles to coordinate. Their calls sliced through the dawn air like quick notes in an otherwise slow symphony. Every sound had purpose: to locate, to warn, to claim territory, or to rally others. The dawn chorus was not just about noise. It was timing, a rhythm repeated daily. By calling at dawn, animals maximized their chances of being heard when the air was still cool and sound traveled farther. Mist and moisture dampened movement, creating a stage where voices carried clearly. Each species claimed its place in this rhythm, layering their sounds into a living orchestra. In forests, the chorus was dense and overlapping. Calls bounced off trees, creating echoes that made the soundscape thicker. In open plains, the calls stretched farther, with long pauses between distant voices. Near rivers and lakes, the chorus mixed with splashes, croaks, and the rush of water, blending animal and environment into one seamless performance. For dinosaurs, the dawn chorus was also survival. Prey animals listened carefully to the shifting soundscape. A sudden silence could mean a predator had entered the area. Parents located their young through specific calls, ensuring they stayed together in the crowd. Hatchlings responded instinctively, their tiny cries weaving into the larger chorus. Even predators used the chorus, not only to communicate but to listen, tracking prey by the calls they made in the early hours. Fossil evidence gives us glimpses of these sounds. Hadrosaur skulls with elaborate crests show chambers perfectly designed for resonance. The hollow tubes likely produced low, mournful calls, deep enough to vibrate through the earth itself. Pterosaur crests may have worked similarly, amplifying their cries as they took flight at dawn. Even small dinosaurs like Oviraptor had skull features suggesting complex vocal abilities, hints of high-pitched calls that could pierce the morning air. But perhaps the most important part of the dawn chorus was its emotional impact for a herd of dinosaurs waking together and calling in unison created cohesion. It reminded every member they belonged to something larger, a sound bond that tied them as tightly as sight or smell. For solitary predators, a dawn call announced dominance, a warning to rivals before the day began. The chorus was not just sound but social glue, a performance written into the survival of each species. The sky itself played a role. As the sun rose, colors deepened, pinks, oranges, and golds glowing against the earth. The visual beauty paired with sound created an atmosphere that must have been breathtaking. Imagine the first light glinting off the feathers of early birds, shimmering across the scales of great sauropods, and turning river mist into glowing clouds. All of this accompanied by the layered voices of life, creating a sensory experience beyond anything we can replicate. For young dinosaurs, this was the sound of safety. Waking beneath their parents, they listened to the chorus as a daily reassurance. For predators, it was an opportunity as prey revealed their positions through calls. For us, imagining it brings us closer to understanding the rhythm of prehistoric life. The dawn chorus was the heartbeat of each day, a ritual repeated for millions of years. Today, we still hear its echoes. Modern birds fill our mornings with song, insects hum, frogs croak, and mammals call to one another as the sun rises. These are not just coincidences but direct continuations of ancient traditions. The chorus we hear today is the living descendant of the sounds that once filled the Mesozoic dawn. The next time you step outside in the early morning and listen to the calls of birds, the hum of insects, or the distant sounds of waking life, remember that you are hearing something ancient. You are listening to a performance that began with dinosaurs, a chorus that has never stopped, only changed its players. The dawn chorus was more than sound. It was identity, survival, and beauty woven together, a ritual that shaped every morning. In the age of dinosaurs, and though those voices are gone, their rhythm endures, reminding us that the world still sings at sunrise, just as it did millions of years ago. Chapter 10. The day's first hunt. The morning mist lingered low, clinging to ferns and tall grasses as the first shafts of sunlight broke across the ancient horizon. For some creatures, dawn was a time of song, movement, and awakening. For others, it was a time of opportunity. The first hunt of the day began not with a roar, but with silence, careful steps, watchful eyes, and the patience of predators who had survived through instinct sharpened over millions of years. Imagine the Cretaceous plains at daybreak. Herds of hadrosaurs stirred together, shaking dew from their skin, their deep calls echoing like brass instruments across the landscape. Small feathered dinosaurs darted between tree trunks, looking for insects newly awakened by warmth. Overhead, pterosaurs glided in lazy circles, searching for fish as the water below reflected the glow of the sun. But not all eyes were on the dawn sky. Some were locked firmly on the ground, where the hunt was already beginning. A lone predator. Crouched low, its feathers slicked with dew, its breath steaming in the cool morning air. It had survived the long night on an empty stomach, and hunger now drove every movement. Its target was clear, a small group of juvenile herbivores lingering. At the edge of the herd, slow to rise and straying just a little too far from safety. The hunter's body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring. The day's first hunt was about to unfold. Predators of the dinosaur world timed their movements with precision. At dawn, prey animals were groggy, distracted, or clustered in ways that created gaps in their defenses. This was the predator's window, a short span of vulnerability before the herd fully awakened to alertness. Fossil trackways reveal evidence of ambush, sudden bursts of speed that ended in chaos. These preserved moments are silent witnesses to hunts that once shaped life and death. Some predators relied on stealth. Dromaeosaurs, the sickle-clawed hunters we often call raptors, were built for this kind of dawn strike. Their feathers, muffled sound, their agility let them weave through undergrowth, and their curved claws were weapons designed to grip and slash. A single leap at the right moment could bring down prey before alarm spread. The stillness of dawn gave them their edge. Others depended on power. Tyrannosaurs, massive and muscular, may not have been the silent stalkers of legend, but even they could take advantage of dawn. While a herd's defenses were weak, a sudden charge from a tyrannosaur could scatter prey in panic. The thunder of its footsteps, once heard, was often too late. Smaller, slower individuals fell behind, and in the raw calculus of survival, that was all the hunter needed. But hunting was not only about strength or stealth. It was about strategy, often involving more than one predator. Fossils hint that some raptors may have coordinated in groups, calling to one another in sharp notes that cut through the morning air. A few placed themselves ahead of prey, while others drove the herd forward, funneling them into an ambush. If successful, the hunt ended quickly, the cries of prey swallowed by the roar of triumph. For the prey, the day's first hunt was always the most dangerous. Young dinosaurs were especially vulnerable, still learning the signals of alarm from their parents. One wrong move, one hesitation, could be fatal. Fossilized bone beds filled with juveniles tell the story of how often predators succeeded. Yet prey had their strategies too. Herd animals stayed close, using sheer numbers as a shield. Adults often placed themselves around their young, their eyes scanning the mist for signs of movement. When alarm calls broke the morning stillness, herds moved as one, a storm of legs and tails crashing across the earth. The environment itself played a role. Mist and long shadows gave predators cover, but also masked their own vision. The sound of insects and frogs created a constant hum, sometimes drowning the noise of a moving hunter, but other times warning prey when silence suddenly fell. Rivers, forests, and plains each provided different challenges. On open ground, speed was survival. In dense forests, agility and awareness mattered most. Near water, predators risked ambush themselves from crocodile-like reptiles lurking beneath the surface. The first hunt of the day was not always about the biggest kill. Many predators survived on smaller meals, mammals, lizards, fish, or even insects. These were easier to catch, requiring less risk and energy. A small raptor might dart into the undergrowth, seizing a mammal just as it scurried from its burrow. A pterosaur might swoop low over water, catching a fish in its beak before the sun fully broke the horizon. Even small victories mattered, each meal a step toward survival. time. A record of lives lived and lost in the daily cycle of hunting and survival. For the hunters themselves, failure was common. A missed leap meant wasted energy. A failed chase meant hunger dragged on. Fossil studies suggest predators may have gone days or weeks without eating, relying on fat reserves or smaller meals until the next opportunity arose. The day's first hunt was often not the only hunt, but it could mean the difference between survival and starvation. And yet, in the grand rhythm of prehistoric life, hunting was never only about death. It was about balance. Each successful hunt fed predators, but also strengthened prey populations by removing the weak, sick, or slow. Over millions of years, this constant pressure shaped evolution itself, driving adaptations in speed, defense, intelligence, and communication. The dawn hunt was not only a daily ritual, it was one of nature's engines, forging the survival strategies that defined the age of dinosaurs. As the sun rose higher, the mist began to lift. The chorus of morning grew louder, insects buzzing, herds calling, birds taking flight. The first hunt of the day reached its end, successful for some, devastating for others. The world moved forward, as it always did, carrying the echoes of survival into the heat of the day. The prehistoric morning was never quiet for long. It was a time of choices, of risks taken and avoided, of survival decided in moments. For the predator, the dawn hunt was a chance. For the prey, it was a test. For the land itself, it was a cycle, as old as time and as constant as the rising of the sun. The day's first hunt was never the last, but it was always the most important. Chapter 11. The dinosaur with feathers. Imagine closing your eyes and hearing the faint rustle of feathers against a warm breeze. You might think of a forest filled with birds, songbirds hopping from branch to branch, owls gliding silently overhead. But now, picture this. It's not a bird at all. It's a dinosaur. For so long, we pictured these animals as giant, scaly reptiles, sharp teeth, rough hides, armored tails. But then, discoveries began to whisper a different story. Feathers. Bright, delicate, surprisingly bird-like feathers. This revelation wasn't just about decoration. It was about identity. Dinosaurs, long thought to be cold-blooded, lumbering giants, were suddenly closer to birds than reptiles. They were vibrant, lively, even graceful. Can you imagine a raptor covered in feathers, its body shimmering with patterns, its wings, yes, wings, tucked against its sides? It's almost poetic, a merging of past and present, reminding us that what flies above us today has roots that stretch deep into the Mesozoic. The first whispers of this truth came from fossils in China. The Liaoning province, in particular, became a time capsule, rocks preserving not just bones, but impressions of skin, feathers, and sometimes even color. One of the most famous finds was Sinosauropteryx, a small, agile dinosaur whose skeleton carried soft outlines of feathery filaments. This wasn't just wishful thinking, it was evidence etched in stone. What's more, some of these fossils still carried traces of pigment cells, suggesting that these dinosaurs weren't dull brown or gray. They may have been patterned, striped, even ringed with colors that would rival modern birds. But why feathers? At first, scientists debated whether they were just fuzzy coverings for warmth. After all, a small dinosaur scurrying through a cooler forest might benefit from insulation. But as more specimens turned up, it became clear feathers weren't limited to small-bodied dinosaurs. Larger species also bore them, sometimes in decorative plumes that didn't serve much of a thermal purpose. That raised another question. Were feathers for display? Imagine a dinosaur fanning out its bright feathers to attract a mate, just like a peacock today. Suddenly, dinosaurs weren't just survival machines. They were artists of attraction, performers in a prehistoric dance of beauty. And then came Microraptor, one of the most astonishing revelations in paleontology. This crow-sized dinosaur didn't just have feathers on its arms. It had them on its legs too, 4 wings. Picture it for a moment. Gliding silently through prehistoric forests, its limbs spread wide, feathers catching the light. It wasn't quite a bird, but it wasn't far off either. Could it fly? Sort of. Could it glide between trees? Absolutely. It was nature experimenting, testing designs that would later perfect themselves in true birds. The first test flights of evolution right before our eyes. Of course, not everyone accepted this feathered revolution at first. For decades, dinosaurs were locked into the image of reptiles, scaly, lumbering, tail-dragging. When feathered fossils began surfacing, many resisted. It must be contamination, some said. Those impressions are just skin patterns. But the evidence only grew stronger. Archaeopteryx, the classic first bird, was re-examined, and even it revealed more feather details than originally recognized. Suddenly, the line between bird and dinosaur wasn't a sharp cut. It was a blur. Birds weren't just descendants of dinosaurs. Birds were dinosaurs. Think about that for a second. The sparrow you see outside your window, the hawk gliding above a field, the pigeon pecking at crumbs in the city. All of them are living dinosaurs. The story of extinction, the tale that wiped out the giant reptiles, wasn't the end of their story at all. It was a transformation, a survival, but the feather story doesn't end with flight. Some dinosaurs had feathers too short or too fluffy to ever lift them into the air. Take the mighty Utaranus, for instance. This early cousin of Tyrannosaurus rex was nearly 30 feet long and covered in a shaggy coat of feathers. Imagine that, a giant predator, not with bare, scaly skin, but draped in a thick covering that made it look more like a massive predatory emu. Why? Most likely insulation. Utaranus lived in northern China, where climates were cooler. Feathers would have kept its massive body warm. A reminder that feathers weren't just for flight. They were for survival in more ways than one. And yet, as fascinating as insulation and flight are, perhaps the most enchanting purpose of feathers was display. We humans are drawn to color, pattern, flair. Dinosaurs, it seems, weren't much different. The discovery of pigment in fossilized feathers has revealed shades of iridescent black, rusty reds, and subtle bands of color. Think of Microraptor again, not just gliding but shimmering, its feathers reflecting light like a crow or raven. Imagine how dazzling that must have been in the forest sunlight, catching the eye of a potential mate, or warning rivals to keep their distance. Of course, this also transforms how we picture the most famous dinosaurs. Velociraptor, immortalized in movies as a sleek, scaly predator, almost certainly had feathers. Fossils from Mongolia have revealed quill knobs on its arms, the very same feature birds today used to anchor wing feathers. Picture it now, a predator. Still deadly, still intelligent, but feathered, swift, its plumage giving it an even more striking presence. Suddenly, the predator becomes not just terrifying but beautiful. A hunter cloaked in nature's artistry. And what of Tyrannosaurus rex? Did it have feathers? The debate continues. Some scientists argue that juveniles likely had feathers, insulating them while they were smaller. Adults, however, may have shed most of their plumage as they grew, relying on sheer body mass to regulate temperature. Others suggest patches of feathers may have remained, possibly as display features. Can you picture a young T-Rex fluffy? Like an oversized chick, growing into its scaly, bone-crushing adult form? It's almost endearing, until you remember the jaws. Feathers also remind us that dinosaurs weren't bound to the stereotypes of drab, dull colors. For so long, illustrations painted them in greens, browns, and grays. But now, the door is wide open to imagination backed by evidence. Dinosaurs could have been as vibrant as today's tropical birds. They could have had patterns for camouflage, streaks of color for communication, or bold displays to intimidate. Evolution, after all, doesn't waste a tool as versatile as feathers. What's perhaps most poetic is the connection we now see every day. Birds are the living link, a direct continuation of this story. When you see a robin fluff its feathers in winter, you're watching the survival strategy of small dinosaurs from millions of years ago. When you see a hummingbird hover, you're witnessing the culmination of evolutionary experiments that began with creatures like Microraptor. The world is full of dinosaurs. They simply changed shape, and so the next time someone tells you dinosaurs are gone, you can smile, because they aren't. They're perched on fences. They're soaring across skies. They're singing in the trees outside your window. Feathers turned out to be the clue, the gentle reminder that life doesn't just vanish, it adapts, transforms, continues. Dinosaurs with feathers changed everything we thought we knew. They blurred boundaries, rewrote textbooks, and reminded us that science is not about static truths, but evolving understanding. What began as a radical idea is now the accepted reality. Dinosaurs were not scaly relics of the past. They were vibrant, feathered, and alive in ways we're only beginning to imagine. And that means, in a way, we still live in their world. Skies glittering with stars. And when darkness fell, a different kind of hunter stirred. The nighttime belonged to creatures often overlooked in our imagination, the star hunters. These were the predators who thrived not in the blaze of day, but under the quiet mystery of the night. And while the fossil record rarely whispers clearly about behavior tied to the hours of darkness, subtle clues from bones, from teeth, and from modern descendants reveal an extraordinary truth. Night was anything but quiet in the age of dinosaurs. It was alive, tense, and brimming with predators that ruled by starlight. Imagine the late Jurassic. The sun dips below the horizon, and the last golden light fades across fern-covered valleys. Herds of herbivores settle into restless sleep there, ears twitching at every faint rustle. In the silence, predators begin to move. Their advantage lies not in size or brute strength, but in senses sharpened by evolution to pierce the dark. How do we know that some dinosaurs hunted by night? Paleontologists have studied the eye sockets and fossilized scleral rings, bony structures that help determine the shape and size of the pupil. By comparing them to modern birds and reptiles, scientists can tell whether a species was more likely adapted to daytime, nighttime, or a mix of both. The evidence is striking. Several predatory species had eyes built for low light. One of the most remarkable is Truden, a small bird-like predator with a brain disproportionately large for its body. If dinosaurs had a candidate for owl of owl, the Mesozoic, Truden fits the part. Its eyes were enormous relative to its skull, with a structure suited for gathering every scrap of moonlight. Picture it, feathers rustling softly as it weaves between the shadows, talons flexing, head swiveling with uncanny precision. To a small mammal, perhaps scampering for seeds in the underbrush, Truden's gaze must have felt inescapable, like being caught in twin beams of silent lanterns. And Truden wasn't alone. Other theropods, including certain raptors, carried signs of night vision. Predators didn't need to rival the giant carnivores like Allosaurus or Tyrannosaurus to dominate. Instead, they mastered the hours when competition was asleep. It's a reminder that power in the prehistoric world wasn't always measured in size, but in timing. Night also brought changes in sound. With daytime insects silenced and the chaos of herds at rest, the world echoed differently. Scientists suggest that many small dinosaurs relied on acute hearing to locate prey in the dark. Some species, again like Truden, had unusually developed inner ears, hinting at sensitivity to faint scuttling in the undergrowth. Can you imagine standing in that darkness? The air heavy with the scent of damp earth, the sky brilliant with constellations. Unknown to us today. The calls of nocturnal reptiles echoing, strange croaks and hisses carried across the stillness. Then silence. The sudden eerie stillness that means a hunter is near. Not all star hunters stalked with stealth. Some, like the early mammals that lived alongside them, evolved counter-strategies. Fossils of burrows, some preserved with entire mammalian families, curled inside, suggest that hiding underground was one of the best defenses against feathered night stalkers. But predators are patient. Imagine a raptor pausing by a burrow entrance, tilting its head, listening for the faint heartbeats below. Evolution in the night was a constant chess match between predator and prey. We often think of Tyrannosaurus rex as the archetypal predator of the Cretaceous, a beast of raw daylight terror. But recent studies suggest that even apex predators might not have been entirely bound to the sun. Large eyes combined with the possibility of sensitive hearing and smell open the door to speculation that T-Rex could have hunted at dawn, dusk, or even under moonlight. Picture a forest clearing bathed in pale silver light, and a shadow moving between the trees, a shadow with teeth longer than your hand. The thought alone sends a shiver, but the true masters of the night may have been smaller predators. Just as today's lions dominate the day while leopards prowl silently at night, the Mesozoic likely had its own hierarchy. Dinosaurs like Trudon and small dromaeosaurs may have specialized in nocturnal ambushes, while larger carnivores prowled during the day. This balance allowed ecosystems to function without constant, direct conflict between hunters. It was nature's way of dividing time into territories, just as it divided land into niches. And what of the stars themselves? It's easy to forget that prehistoric skies were richer than ours. No cities dimmed the heavens. The Milky Way arched like a silver river across the dark, the moon rising in silent dominance. For the creatures alive then, the stars weren't distant lights. They were the backdrop of survival. Some scientists believe dinosaurs could even navigate by the stars, much like modern birds. Migratory instincts run deep in avian DNA, and since birds are living dinosaurs, it's not unthinkable that their ancestors carried similar abilities. Could herds of small, bird-like dinosaurs have oriented themselves by constellations as they moved across the plains? Could star hunters have timed their hunts by the phases of the moon, preferring darker nights for stealth? These questions remain tantalizingly unanswered, but the clues are there, etched faintly into bone and behavior that echoes through their descendants. Night also created an entirely different theater of drama, the clash between species that rarely met in daylight. Imagine a Trudon, feathers puffed against the cool air, stalking a lizard in the dark. Suddenly it pauses. A shadow looms, not another of its kind, but an ancient crocodile, half out of the water, eyes gleaming. The night blurred boundaries between ecosystems, bringing together creatures that might otherwise never compete. In these hidden hours, survival often came down to who had the sharper senses, the quieter step, the deadlier patience. And then there is the emotional weight of imagining these nights. Dinosaurs weren't mythological monsters, they were animals, bound by the same rhythms of fear, hunger, and survival that guide life today. A young hadrosaur calf, nudging closer to its mother in the dark, its breathing quick and shallow, as distant rustles drift through the trees. A raptor, alone, perching in silence, gazing at the stars as if considering its next move. These moments, tender, tense, alive, make the prehistoric night as vivid as the brightest day. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the star hunters is that dinosaurs were not confined to one way of living. They weren't just thunderous giants, moving under a blazing sun. They were adaptive, flexible, and in many ways far more complex than we once imagined. Some hunted by day, some by night. Some grew massive to intimidate, others stayed small to specialize. The dark wasn't empty, it was another stage on which evolution played its endless game. So the next time you step outside at night and look up at the stars, imagine them casting their glow not only on our world now, but on a world long gone. A world where feathers glimmered faintly in moonlight, where shadows moved between ferns, and where eyes gleamed like embers in the blackness. The night was theirs. The Star Hunters reigned. Chapter 13. Echoes of the nest, parental care, eggs, and the tender side of dinosaur families. When we imagine dinosaurs, the first pictures that come to mind are often ferocious jaws, towering giants, or armored titans locked in battles for survival. But hidden within the fossil record is a quieter story, one that doesn't roar or stop across the earth. Instead, it whispers of tenderness, of patience, and of one of the most universal instincts found across the animal kingdom, the instinct to nurture. Dinosaurs, it turns out, weren't just predators or prey. They were also parents. Picture the late Cretaceous plains at dawn. The rising sun glows faintly pink across a stretch of low scrubland. Among the grasses, a circular depression in the soil comes into view, a nest. Inside, dozens of oval eggs are carefully arranged in a spiral pattern. And there, at the very center, sits a feather-covered creature about the size of a modern ostrich. Its arms are tucked over the fragile shells, wings acting almost like a blanket. This was Oviraptor, whose name ironically means egg thief. For decades, paleontologists thought fossils of Oviraptor hunched over eggs meant it had been caught in the act of stealing them. Only later did we realize the opposite. It was brooding, much like a mother hen, shielding its young beneath its body when a sudden sandstorm buried it alive. What once looked like thievery turned out to be one of the earliest glimpses of parental devotion preserved in stone. These discoveries changed the way we think about dinosaurs entirely. Before the 1970s, the prevailing belief was that dinosaurs laid their eggs and then abandoned them, like most modern reptiles do. Crocodiles and lizards may guard nests for a while, but extended care of hatchlings is rare. But then came a cascade of evidence suggesting dinosaurs acted differently. Some raised their young, some lived in family groups, and some even returned to the same nesting grounds year after year, much like seabirds or penguins today. A story not just of egg-laying but of growth and care. The young Maiasaura were not fully developed when they hatched. Their legs were weak, their bones soft, their teeth already worn from being fed. They weren't ready to walk off into the world. They depended on their parents. Fossilized remains suggested that adults may have brought food back to the nest, possibly in the form of chewed vegetation, much like birds feeding their chicks today. The very name Maiasaura came from this realization. Here was proof that at least some dinosaurs were doting caregivers. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine it. The low rumble of adults moving through the grasslands, the careful nudge of a mother pushing ferns toward her chirping young, the rustle of hatchlings in a nest waiting for the comfort of their parents' return. It's a far gentler picture of prehistoric life than the ones we usually see, but no less awe-inspiring. And yet, dinosaur parenting wasn't just about food, it was about protection. Fossilized nests often show careful construction, rings of stones placed around eggs to prevent them from rolling away, or shallow pits dug into the earth for insulation. Some dinosaurs likely covered their eggs with vegetation, which decomposed and gave off warmth, essentially creating natural incubators. Others used the heat of the sun or geothermal soil to maintain the delicate balance needed for embryos to survive. This delicate balance came at a cost. Dinosaur eggs were fragile. not just in structure, but in survival odds. Predators lurked everywhere, from mammals eager to snatch a meal to other dinosaurs willing to raid nests. Fossils show clear signs of predation, with eggs cracked and contents consumed. Some species may have relied on sheer numbers, laying dozens of eggs to ensure at least a few survived. Others placed their nests in colonies, creating what must have been massive, noisy rookery sites where hundreds of parents and hatchlings congregated together. Safety in numbers was not just a bird strategy. It likely began here, millions of years earlier, among the dinosaurs. One particularly haunting fossil, discovered in Mongolia, captured a scene frozen in time: a group of young protoceratops. Small, frilled herbivores, huddled together, buried by a sudden sandstorm. Their clustering suggested something more than chance. Perhaps they were siblings, staying close to one another for warmth and protection, much as modern chicks do. Such fossils remind us that the bonds of family were not exclusive to mammals or birds. They were part of the dinosaur world too, but not all dinosaurs raised their young the same way. The massive sauropods, giants like Apatosaurus or Titanosaurus, likely took a different approach. Their eggs, often found in elongated clutches, suggest that after laying, the parents moved on, leaving the son to do the work. With bodies the size of buildings, it may have been impossible to sit on or guard their nests without crushing them. Instead, they may have relied on sheer quantity, laying dozens upon dozens of eggs so that even if predators feasted, enough would hatch to carry on the species. For these giants, parental care might have ended at the moment the eggs touched the ground. Contrast that with the raptors. Agile, feathered predators like Velociraptor and Trudon. Their nests often show careful arrangement, eggs placed in pairs, tilted at angles, and sometimes fossilized with evidence of an adult crouched over them. Some paleontologists believe these dinosaurs not only brooded their eggs, but may have cared for hatchlings for weeks or months afterward, teaching them hunting skills or at least providing protection while they grew. When you watch a modern eagle tending its nest, you may be witnessing a behavior that began with raptors long before birds took to the skies. One of the most fascinating aspects of dinosaur parental care is how it bridges the gap between reptiles and birds. Today, crocodiles guard their nests fiercely and even help their young reach the water, but they don't go much further than that. Birds, on the other hand, display some of the most elaborate and emotional parenting behaviors in the animal kingdom. Dinosaurs, it seems, occupied a middle ground. They experimented with strategies, some abandoned, some guarded, and some nurtured intensely. Evolution, as always, was trying out possibilities, and yet, beyond the science, there is something deeply moving about these stories. Fossils of oviraptors frozen mid-brood, of Maiasaura hatchlings clustered in nests, of young protoceratops pressed together in their final moments. These are not just bones and stone. They are echoes of care, of family, of devotion in a world that we so often reduce to violence and teeth. Dinosaurs were survivors, yes, but they were also nurturers. They lived in groups, they defended their young, they carved out moments of tenderness in an unforgiving world. Imagine for a moment lying under a prehistoric night sky, the stars blazing brighter than we ever see today. Somewhere nearby, a Maiasaura mother settles into her nest, her tail curled protectively around her young. The air is filled not with the silence of extinction, but with the tiny peeps of hatchlings waiting for their parents. In that moment, dinosaurs feel less like alien monsters of a lost age, and more like family. When we listen closely, the earth itself seems to whisper their story. Not in the thunder of footsteps, but in the quiet crackle of an eggshell breaking open, in the gentle rustle of feathers over a brood, in the timeless rhythm of life being passed to the next generation. These are the echoes of the nest. Chapter 14. Twilight across the plains. The day is slipping away. The heat of the sun that once shimmered off the dusty ground begins to fade, replaced by the long shadows of towering ferns and cycads. Across the prehistoric plains, an entire ecosystem shifts in rhythm with the sinking sun. This is not just the end of a day, it is the slow transition into another world, one where the sounds, sights, and even the very behavior of dinosaurs change. Imagine standing in the heart of a late Cretaceous savanna. The air hums with fading warmth, the golden light softens, and silhouettes of dinosaurs move across the horizon. Herds that spent the day grazing under the burning sun now begin their evening rituals. There's a serenity in this hour, but also an unspoken tension, because twilight is when hunters and prey cross paths. It is the calm before the night, a moment when survival balances on the edge. The great herds of hadrosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs, were some of the most dominant figures on these plains. During the day, their numbers acted as protection, a sea of bodies moving together in unison. But as the light fades, their instincts shift. Mothers nudge their young closer, forming tighter circles. Older individuals take positions at the edges, using their bulk to shield the vulnerable. You can almost hear the low, rumbling calls echoing through the dusk, a mixture of reassurance and warning. These sounds, traveling across the plains, were as much a comfort to their kin as they were a reminder to lurking predators that the herd was aware, alert, and ready. The atmosphere of twilight was not only about dinosaurs, though. The very landscape came alive differently at this hour. Insects that hid from the blazing sun emerged in swarms, filling the sky with their delicate buzzing. Primitive mammals, tiny, sharp-eyed creatures no larger than modern rats, scurried in the fading light, darting between roots and shrubs, seizing the brief safety of twilight to forage. For them, the night brought opportunity, but also immense danger. Back within the herds, even giants like the massive sauropods were not immune to this change. Picture an enormous Alamosaurus, its long neck arching upward to snatch a last mouthful of leaves before the darkness swallowed the forest. As the shadows grew deeper, even these titans became more cautious. A creature the size of a 5-story building was not likely to be hunted by a predator, but vulnerability came in different forms. Young sauropods, far smaller than their parents, were easy prey. The herd instinct was their best defense, clustering around the calves as they trudged slowly towards safer resting grounds. And yet, for some dinosaurs, twilight was not a time of fear, but of opportunity. Predators such as dromaeosaurs, the smaller, feathered cousins of Velociraptor, thrived in these conditions. The waning light favored their agility and cunning. Imagine them slinking low through the tall grasses, their feathers ruffling in the breeze, eyes fixed on the silhouettes of young dinosaurs wandering too far from the herd. Their senses were sharper than most, perfectly tuned for the hunt at dusk. But twilight was not always a bloody affair. In many cases, it was a shared rhythm, predators keeping their distance, herds settling down, insects filling the night air with their drone, and mammals daring to explore. It was as if the entire landscape inhaled deeply, preparing itself for the long night ahead. The skies above mirrored the transformation below. Flocks of pterosaurs wheeled against the fading orange glow, their wings catching the last rays of light as they drifted back to their nesting cliffs. Some were enormous, with wingspans rivaling small airplanes, yet they too obeyed the cycle of light. For creatures so reliant on sight, dusk was a boundary not to be crossed carelessly. They were animals with daily rhythms just like those of today. They needed food, safety, companionship, and rest. Now imagine yourself lying in that ancient grass, listening to the soundscape of twilight. The thundering footsteps of giants have softened. The calls of duck-bills echo faintly. The air cools. The smell of earth and plants intensifies, and somewhere in the distance, a predator lets out a low cry. This is the prehistoric equivalent of a lullaby, a moment when even the fiercest of creatures must pause before the mystery of nightfall. Twilight across the plains was not simply the end of a day. It was a reminder that life, no matter how large or small, was bound together by cycles of light and dark, of safety and risk, of rest and survival. And as the first stars flickered in the sky, a whole new chapter of dinosaur life was about to unfold under the cover of darkness. Chapter 15. Ancient neighbors. When we think of the age of dinosaurs, the mind is filled with giants, towering sauropods, horned ceratopsians, fierce tyrannosaurs. But the truth is, dinosaurs did not rule their world alone. They lived alongside countless other creatures, some tiny, some terrifying, and some that looked remarkably familiar. These were the ancient neighbors of the dinosaurs: mammals, crocodiles, insects, amphibians, and fish, the overlooked majority who shaped and shared their ecosystems. Step back in time and picture a warm, humid Cretaceous floodplain. A herd of triceratops grazes among ferns, while a tyrannosaurus stalks in the distance. Yet, if you shift your gaze downward, beneath the towering legs of these giants, an entirely different drama is unfolding. Tiny mammals, no bigger than modern shrews, scurry through the undergrowth, searching for seeds, insects, and worms. They dart between roots and fallen branches, their eyes wide, their senses sharp. To them, dinosaurs are looming shadows, both a danger and a shield. For most of the Mesozoic, mammals lived in the margins. They were not the rulers of the land as they would be after the dinosaurs' extinction, but they were survivors, adapting to niches the giants left untouched. Some were insect eaters, snapping up beetles and termites. Others experimented with gliding membranes, soaring between branches like prehistoric flying squirrels. Fossils even show early mammals that preyed on small dinosaurs. One famous fossil captures a mammal locked in combat with a young ceratopsian, proof that even the smallest neighbors were bold when opportunity struck. But mammals were not alone. The waterways that cut across dinosaur landscapes were ruled by crocodiles. Not the same crocodiles we know today, but their ancient kin, some bizarrely different, others hauntingly familiar. Some were sleek hunters, snapping fish from the water. Others grew into monstrous forms that rivaled dinosaurs themselves. Sarcosuchus, for instance, a giant crocodile from the Cretaceous, reached lengths of nearly 40 feet. It lurked in rivers, waiting for the unwary, a dinosaur calf perhaps, or a thirsty hadrosaur, to stray too close. With a sudden surge, it would erupt from the water, jaws snapping shut with bone-crushing force. On land, insects were everywhere, a quiet but powerful presence. Dragonflies with wingspans the size of dinner plates darted through the air. Ants, still early in their evolutionary story, scurried in colonies beneath the soil. Termites gnawed at decaying wood, recycling plant matter and shaping the ecosystem in ways as vital as the dinosaurs themselves. To a giant like a Brachiosaurus, insects might seem insignificant, but they were the engineers of the land, breaking down vegetation, pollinating plants, and feeding countless small animals. Then there were the amphibians, frogs, salamanders, and others that thrived in the wetlands. Their croaks and calls would have filled the night air, just as they do today. Fish swam in the rivers, feeding pterosaurs and early birds. Turtles, armored and slow, drifted in ponds or trudged along muddy banks. The world of dinosaurs was not only a kingdom of reptiles, but a symphony of life in which every note mattered. What's fascinating is how these ancient neighbors often mirrored the roles we see in ecosystems today. Mammals hid and scurried, waiting for their time. Crocodiles dominated the rivers as ambush predators. Insects thrived everywhere, from soil to canopy, quietly sustaining the food chain. Together, they created the backdrop against which dinosaurs lived out their dramas. It's tempting to imagine the Mesozoic as a world dominated by colossal creatures alone. But in truth, it was a world of layers. From the buzzing of mosquitoes at dusk to the splash of a crocodile in the river, from the skitter of mammals through the underbrush to the silent glide of dragonflies across the sky, the dinosaurs' world was alive in ways we often overlook, and these neighbors mattered. Without insects, the plants dinosaurs ate might not have thrived. Without amphibians and fish, the wetlands would have collapsed. Without crocodiles, rivers would have lacked balance. Even the tiny mammals, quietly surviving in the shadows, were destined to inherit the earth when the giants fell. So the next time you imagine a dinosaur grazing or hunting, remember the life at its feet, in the water beside it, and buzzing in the air around it. The age of dinosaurs was never just about dinosaurs. It was about the countless neighbors who made their world whole. Chapter 16. Twilight across the plains. The sun dips low on the horizon. Golden light spills across the ancient plains, stretching long shadows over the ground. This is the moment when the day exhales, the great sigh of the Cretaceous evening. Heat begins to fade, cicadas hum their final chorus, and the world softens under the embrace of twilight. Out on the vast grass-like ferns and scattered groves, herds of dinosaurs settle in after a long day of survival. These plains, alive with motion only hours ago, now enter a rhythm of stillness, as though the earth itself is preparing for rest. The drama of the day, the hunts, the chases, the feeding gives way to a calmer story, one of winding down, of families gathering close, of life under skies brushed with the colors of fire and fading light. You can imagine the horizon. Purples and oranges mix into streaks of fading blue, and the last warmth of the sun glows like embers across the land. The calls of great animals soften into gentle murmurs. For a moment, the Cretaceous feels timeless, not wild, not chaotic, but quietly beautiful. Take a look at the great herds. The long-necked sauropods, once moving endlessly in search of food, now cluster together in stillness. Their bodies sway gently as they rest their immense weight, tails wrapping around the youngest members of the group. Imagine the ground trembling beneath them, not from their thunderous footsteps, but from the subtle vibrations of their low, resonant calls. Even as night approaches, these deep rumbles roll softly through the air, like a lullaby only their kind can truly hear. Nearby, hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, gather in tight-knit groups. Their hollow crests, once used to send booming calls across the plains, now produce quieter sounds, soft communication meant for their families. Alone, parents nudge their young to huddle in safety, the little ones nestling into the warmth of the group. These creatures, so often depicted as prey in the harsh world of predators, reveal another side at twilight, the tenderness of community, the comfort of belonging. The air cools, carrying with it the mingling sense of plants crushed underfoot, of distant wetlands, of earth that has soaked up the sun all day. Insects begin their nightly chorus, wings beating in rhythmic patterns, adding a layer of sound that blankets the plains. The world, alive with noise and movement during the day, now becomes a symphony of whispers. And above, the skies continue their transformation. Raptors that once scanned the ground for movement during the heat of day now retreat to their roosts, folding feathered wings as they prepare for sleep. Small pterosaurs wheel across the fading light for one last flight, catching thermals before they vanish into shadow. Their cries echo faintly against the glowing clouds, a reminder that even the skies of the Cretaceous knew moments of serenity. As the herds shift and settle, predators also make their choices. Some, like the mighty tyrannosaurs, prefer the full cover of darkness for their hunts. For now, they remain shadows at the edges of the plains, watching, waiting, conserving their strength. Twilight is their transition, their pause before the real work of the night begins. Smaller carnivores too hold their silence. Dromaeosaurs crouch low in the brush, eyes glinting faintly in the dimming light. They listen, they wait. Their world is not yet awake, but this hour isn't about fear, it's about calm. Even in a time when danger lurked in every corner of the prehistoric world, twilight carved out moments of peace. Life slowed down. The urgency of survival quieted into something gentler, a rhythm all living things seem to understand. Because in this stillness you'd realize life hasn't changed so much. The way creatures prepare for night, the way they gather together, the way they pause between day and darkness. It's a cycle that remains alive even today. Twilight brings vulnerability, yes, but it also brings trust. Trust that the herd will protect its young. Trust that the night will pass and the sun will return. Trust that survival is not only about fighting, it is also about resting. The stars begin to appear now, faint and scattered at first, then brighter as the last light drains from the horizon. These were the same stars we see today, though their positions have shifted across millions of years. Imagine a hadrosaur calf looking up into that ancient night sky, its eyes catching the sparkle of constellations that one day humans would name. To that young creature, the stars may have been nothing more than distant lights, yet those same lights guided its world, marked the turning of seasons, told the story of cycles far older than any species. In this way, twilight across the plains was more than just an ending to the day. It was a bridge, a handoff from light to darkness, from activity to stillness, from survival to trust. It was a reminder that even in an age of titans, even in a world of predators and prey, there were evenings when the earth slowed down, when life, vast and varied, shared the same breath of calm. So as we let the Cretaceous night settle in, close your eyes and hold on to that image. Herds huddled close, the sky glowing with its last fire, the land sighing into quiet. In the end, twilight was not about endings at all. It was about continuity. About the unbroken thread of life that carried on, night after night, into a future neither dinosaurs nor humans could yet imagine. Chapter 17. The long Cretaceous night, the last glow of twilight fades. The plains are no longer bathed in gold and orange, but in shadow, in shades of deep blue and velvet black. The sun has slipped beyond the horizon, leaving behind only the quiet hush of night. For the dinosaurs of the Cretaceous, this is not the end of life's rhythm, it is simply another chapter. Day belonged to the herds, the grazers, the endless movement across open land. Night belongs to another world. A quieter one, perhaps, but not always a safer one. The first sound to rise is not a roar, nor the thundering of footsteps. It is the soft chorus of insects. Crickets, ancient relatives of those we hear today, begin their chirping, filling the darkness with steady rhythm. Their voices act as a constant undercurrent, a pulse that keeps the silence from feeling empty. Moths, with wings patterned like leaves and bark, flutter across the cooling air. Beetles scuttle through the grass-like ferns, carrying out their nightly scavenging unseen. In this time, the smallest lives take center stage. Above, the sky has transformed into a vast canvas of stars. Without city lights, without any human presence, the heavens blaze in a clarity we can hardly imagine today. The Milky Way stretches in a brilliant band across the night, a river of ancient fire guiding the creatures below. A crescent moon climbs upward, casting its silver glow across the plains, enough to outline the silhouettes of great herds that now lie still. Sauropods shift in their sleep, the gentle rumble of their breath mingling with the night air. Hadrosaur calves huddle tight against their parents, shielded in warmth and protection. Yet not all rests. This is the time of hunters. The great tyrannosaurs stir from the shadows. Their eyes, adapted to catch faint light, scan the plains for movement. Their footsteps are measured, careful, a far cry from the thunderous charges of daylight hunts. The night gives them cover, and with it, power. Their sense of smell guides them more than their sight, each breath pulling in invisible trails that tell the story of the land, which creatures passed here, which are nearby, which are weak or vulnerable. For prey animals, darkness is both a shield and a danger. Smaller predators, too, rise with the night. Packs of raptors move like phantoms between ferns and brush, their feathers blending into the dark. They communicate with soft clicks and whistles, sounds too faint for prey to notice, but clear enough for their packmates. A rustle here, a glint of an eye there. Their presence is felt more than seen. And yet, the night is not all menace. There is wonder, too. In the shallows of lakes and wetlands, amphibians sing. Frogs, some no larger than a human hand, others strange giants by our standards, add their voices to the chorus. Their calls echo, bouncing across still water under starlight. Fireflies, their glow ancient even in this age, begin their delicate dance, pulsing light across the dark plains like drifting embers. The night becomes alive with small illuminations, brief and flickering, reminders that even in the darkest times, life finds ways to shine. The temperature drops. The heat of the day is gone, replaced by cool breezes that sweep across the open land. Some creatures shiver, pressing closer together, relying on their herd for warmth. Others, feathered or furred, are better suited for the chill. Small mammals dart from burrow to burrow, snouts twitching as they forage under cover of night. For them, the darkness is a sanctuary, a time when they can move freely without drawing the attention of the day's giants. Listen closely, and you can hear the layered symphony of the Cretaceous night. Crickets keep their rhythm, frogs add melody. The occasional cry of a nocturnal bird echoes sharply, cutting through the quiet. Far off, the low roar of a predator rumbles like distant thunder. And between these voices is the silence, a silence so deep it makes every sound matter, every breath, every step. For the dinosaurs themselves, night is not always a time of fear. It is also a time of dreams. Picture the herds asleep under the stars, their bodies pressed close, their breathing steady. Do they dream? Science cannot say. But it is not difficult to imagine a young hadrosaur twitching as though chasing something in its mind, or a sauropod shifting restlessly as though visions pass through its ancient consciousness. The world may be dangerous, but even in such a time, rest was essential. Sleep kept life moving forward. Far away, in the forests bordering the plains, new voices stir. Owls, not as we know them, but early relatives, hoot into the night. Their wings cut silently through the air, hunting small creatures below. Lizards basked in the last warmth of the day's stones, now cooling in the night air. And in the river shallows, crocodilian forms lurk, eyes reflecting the faintest glimmers of starlight, patient as always. The plains at night are not empty, they are transformed. Every shadow hides a story, every sound a reminder of life adapting to darkness. To live here meant accepting the rhythm of two worlds, one ruled by light, the other by stars. And for us, standing in imagination upon these ancient fields, the long Cretaceous night is a reminder of time itself. These stars, these constellations, are the same ones that still shine above us today. The insects we hear are kin to those that sing outside our own windows. The cycle of rest, of danger, of survival through night continues unbroken. Close your eyes and breathe in this moment. Hear the chorus of insects. Feel the cool sweep of air. See the silhouettes of giants resting under the stars. Know that millions of years ago, in the vast quiet of night, life paused in its own way. It survived, it endured, it dreamed. The long Cretaceous night was not empty. It was alive, with sound, with presence, with a peace as ancient as the stars themselves. Chapter 18. Dawn over the ancient world. The night has stretched long across the plains. The stars still shimmer above, though they are now fading, paling as the first whisper of light rises in the east. Darkness loosens its grip, and with it, the ancient world stirs once more. A faint glow begins low on the horizon. At first it is subtle, a soft wash of pale silver blue that lightens the silhouettes of the resting herds. But it grows steadily, and soon, streaks of pink and amber stretch upward like brushstrokes across the heavens. The Milky Way fades, its brilliance overtaken by the growing power of dawn. The long night is ending. For the dinosaurs, this moment is both familiar and vital. Light brings safety for many, a return to the world where eyes can see clearly, where shadows no longer conceal hidden dangers. Herds that slept uneasily begin to move again, shaking dew from their hides, rumbling low calls to one another. Mothers nudge their young to their feet. The vast cycle of survival begins anew. The first voices of dawn come not from the great beasts, but from the smaller ones. Ancient birds, early cousins of the sparrows, cranes, and gulls we know today, greet the light with cries that echo through the forests and across the water's edge. Their wings, feathered and strong, cut the morning air as they rise from their perches in search of food. They are living testaments that the age of dinosaurs is not merely about giants, but about the seeds of life that would carry into our world. Insects, silent in the cool depths of night, now begin to buzz and hum. Their wings shimmer faintly in the early glow as they take to the skies. Dragonflies, their wings wide as dinner plates, dart across rivers and lakes, catching smaller prey in their swift jaws. Beetles climb over wet ferns, gleaming as the sunlight spreads across the land. Sound of a waking herd is immense, a chorus of bellows calls, and the thunder of dozens of feet pressing into the damp earth. Predators, too, feel the shift. Tyrannosaurs that prowled under cover of darkness now retreat into shadowed forests, resting after a night's hunt. Raptors slink back to their nests, feathers ruffled with the dust of the night. Yet not all leave, some linger, watching the stirring herds, waiting for a moment of weakness as day fully breaks. The balance of predator and prey never rests. Even as the sun rises, the light strengthens. Gold floods across the plains, painting the dew-slit grass in fire. Long-necked dinosaurs stretch upward, their silhouettes cutting against the morning sky as they feed on the tallest branches. In the distance, volcanoes smolder faintly, their slopes red in the early glow. Rivers shimmer, catching sunlight in rippling waves. The world is alive again, as if the long silence of night was nothing more than a pause between heartbeats. The air warms with each passing moment. Mist rises from low-lying wetlands, drifting in ghostly sheets across the land. Frogs fall quiet, as the day's first heat drives them back into the water. The insects grow louder, filling the world with a constant hum. The dawn is not still, it is full of energy, of motion, of 1,000 creatures rushing into the day's rhythm. And in this, there is beauty. Imagine standing upon a ridge, watching the Cretaceous world awaken. The sound of life builds from silence into a crescendo. The sights are endless, great herds moving like rivers of flesh across the plains. Birds wheeling above in swirling flocks, the glint of sunlight on reptilian scales. It is not a land of monsters, as it is so often imagined. It is a land of rhythm and cycle, of morning and night, of birth and death. It is a world that lived as deeply as our own. For the dinosaurs themselves, dawn is survival. They cannot marvel at the beauty of sunrise, but they embody it. The cycle of waking and moving, of feeding and protecting young, of seeking water and shade is life itself. Each sunrise they see is another victory against extinction, another step in their ancient story. Yet as we look back across millions of years, there is also a softness to this dawn. It is a reminder that these creatures were not eternal. The sun that warmed their backs, the stars that guided their nights, would one day rise and set on a world without them. But in their time, they were everything. They filled the earth with motion, with sound, with presence. And in moments like this, when dawn breaks and the world awakens, we can almost feel their lives moving again. The herds march onward, predators retreat or follow. The insects rise higher in the warming air. The morning is in full bloom. Cretaceous day has begun again, and with it, the cycle is complete. The sun has risen over an ancient world. The giants breathe, the herds move, the skies fill with wings. Life continues, endless and unstoppable. For us, it is a memory of a world long gone. For them, it was simply another morning. Dawn over the ancient world was not just the start of a day. It was the eternal rhythm of life itself. Chapter 19. The long Cretaceous night. The sun sinks below the horizon, and the last traces of orange and crimson fade into a vast ocean of deep indigo. The Cretaceous world, so alive and thunderous during the day, now softens into stillness. But this stillness is only an illusion, because under the shroud of night, an entirely different story unfolds, one that rarely gets told. The long Cretaceous night was not empty. It was filled with quiet dramas, hidden movements, and the survival of creatures adapted to thrive beneath the stars. Imagine standing on a primeval plain, the distant silhouettes of massive sauropods fading into the dusk. Their heavy steps, so audible during the day, are muffled now as they settle into rest. Some lie down, tucking their necks against their great bodies, while others remain standing, swaying gently in drowsy balance. But even as giants sleep, the smaller players begin to stir. Insects hum low to the ground. Early mammals creep from burrows, whiskers twitching in the cool air. Frogs croak by ancient wetlands. This was a world not ruled by silence, but by whispers. Sounds too subtle to compete with the daytime roar, but vital to the balance of life. Night favored the overlooked. Small, furry mammals that would have been easy prey in daylight found safety under cover of darkness. They darted out to scavenge seeds, insects, and the scraps left behind by dinosaurs. Many of these tiny creatures had keen eyesight and sharp hearing, a clue to their nocturnal habits. They lived cautiously, yet persistently, in the shadows of giants. The darkness was their ally, giving them a chance to thrive where sunlight meant danger. But not all dinosaurs slept. Some, we believe, embraced the night. Fossil evidence from eye structures, the shape and size of scleral rings preserved in skulls, hints that certain species may have been nocturnal or crepuscular. Velociraptor, for instance, with its keen eyes and predatory nature, could have hunted under dim light. Trudon, a small bird-like predator with unusually large eyes, relative to its body, seems almost perfectly adapted for starlit ambushes. These creatures turned the cover of night into an advantage, slipping silently through ferns and low brush, scanning for movement with senses sharper than those of their daytime rivals. Picture it, a family of protoceratops huddled together, there, small frills overlapping like shields as they rest in the sand dunes. The young ones nestle against their mother, half asleep, vulnerable in the quiet hours. Not far away, a Trudon watches, its pupils wide, catching every flicker of movement. It waits, calculating, before stepping softly forward. In this long night, Even the faintest rustle of sand becomes a lifeline. For predator and prey alike. Above, the sky would have been brilliant, perhaps more dazzling than anything we see today. Without city lights, without the haze of industry, the stars blazed bright, casting a pale glow on the land. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of fireflies. Dinosaurs lived under skies we can only imagine, filled with meteor showers, glowing moons, and the occasional passing comet. To the nocturnal hunters, the stars weren't just scenery, they were guides. The rhythms of moonlight and shadow determined when to move, when to wait, when to strike. Insects owned the soundscape of the night. Crickets rubbed wings together in prehistoric orchestras. Moths as large as birds flitted through the air, drawn to whatever faint light touched. The land. Some beetles glowed faintly, carrying natural bioluminescence, sparks of living light drifting in the underbrush. Crocodile ancestors lounged in shallow waters, eyes glowing eerily above the surface, waiting for something careless enough to slip too close. Bats had not yet appeared, but pterosaurs, the flying reptiles of the Mesozoic, may have filled the night skies instead. Certain species of small pterosaurs, with their sensitive eyesight, might have wheeled silently through the darkness, snapping up insects in flight like the first prototypes of modern bats. The temperature dropped with nightfall. On the warm Cretaceous plains, this cooling would have been a relief. Herds breathed easier, their massive bodies radiating heat into the air. Stegosaurs of earlier times and hadrosaurs of later eras may have shifted positions, circling protectively around their young, creating a living wall against threats. Sleep did not mean vulnerability. It meant trust in numbers, in the collective watchfulness of the herd, and yet danger always prowled. A lone dromaeosaur, a relative of Velociraptor, may have stalked these edges, testing the herd's defenses. One weak individual, one small gap was all it needed. The night turned every shadow into mystery, every whisper into possibility. For herbivores, the dark was both a refuge and a threat. The long Cretaceous night also shaped behaviors in ways we can still glimpse today. Birds, the descendants of dinosaurs, often roost together at night, seeking protection and company. Some sing quietly under moonlight, their calls faint but persistent. Crocodiles still glide silently in the dark, just as their ancestors did. Even mammals like us, with our complicated sleep cycles, carry echoes of those early creatures that made night their sanctuary. But the night was not endless. Slowly, faint light would creep back across the horizon. The first glow of dawn touched the treetops, and creatures of the night retreated. Mammals scurried back into burrows. Nocturnal predators sank into cover, bellies full or still empty, waiting for another chance. The herd stretched and stirred, shaking off the coolness of night as the world prepared to roar to life once more. The cycle of day and night in the Cretaceous was not just a rhythm of light, but a balance of survival, the great and the small, the sleepers and the hunters, all woven into the same eternal dance. The long Cretaceous night was a world we rarely imagine, but it was just as alive, just as filled with struggle and beauty, as the blazing daytime skies. To picture it is to glimpse the hidden half of prehistory, where survival depended not on size or strength alone, but on silence, patience, and the gift of the stars. Chapter 20. Dawn of a New World. 2,000 words. Nature is permanent. The dawn of a new world is not just another day in prehistory. It is the beginning of change. Imagine standing at the edge of a Cretaceous forest just as the sun crests above the trees. Mist clings to the ferns, curling upward like smoke as warmth spreads across the damp ground. A herd of hadrosaurs, their duck-billed snouts still wet with dew, begins to stir. Their calls, low, resonant, almost mournful, ripple through the valley, signaling to others that the day has begun. Tiny mammals scuttle back into the safety of their burrows, their nocturnal business completed. Above, pterosaurs stretch leathery wings, testing the morning air before taking to the skies. In graceful arcs, the world awakens in layers, first insects, then birds, then giants. But this dawn is unlike any other. It carries the faintest echoes of something vast approaching, a shift, so monumental that it will rewrite the future of life on Earth. Dinosaurs, for all their dominance, are living in their final chapter. They don't know it. To them, this is simply morning. But to us, looking back, it is the dawn before transformation, the prelude to an ending. The late Cretaceous was a land of giants, yet also a land of fragility. The ecosystems were intricate. Webs balanced between predator and prey, plant and grazer, scavenger and hunter. Each sunrise renewed this balance. A tyrannosaur stretches its massive body, lifting its head toward the warming air, every muscle rippling with power. It is both lord of the land and a creature bound by the same cycle as the smallest insect buzzing in the ferns. The sun that nourishes the plants also fuels the herbivores and, in turn, feeds the predator. Dawn is the quiet reminder that all things are connected. In the forests, flowers open with the light, their petals reaching outward to capture the sun. This is no small detail. The Cretaceous was the era when flowering plants spread across the globe, transforming landscapes forever. With their blooms came new pollinators, bees, beetles, early butterflies. The mornings were alive with the delicate buzz of wings, a miniature revolution unfolding while massive dinosaurs towered nearby. The dawn of each day mirrored the dawn of this new plant kingdom, whose success would outlast the dinosaurs themselves. And yet, the mornings carried unease. Volcanic rumblings shook parts of the earth. Seas rose and retreated. The climate wavered. For the creatures living then, these shifts were subtle, spread across generations. But they were signs of a world on the brink of change. If one could stand in the Cretaceous dawn and see beyond the horizon of time, the faint trail of a comet might already be visible, hurtling silently toward Earth. For now, though, life flourishes. Picture a triceratops herd bathed in early light, their horns glinting like ivory blades. Calves stumble to their feet, bleating softly as mothers nudge them forward. Every morning is a test of survival for the young, for somewhere in the shadows, a predator is watching. Raptors, smaller but swift and cunning, begin their patrols with the day. Their calls echo sharply through the trees, cutting the soft air like flint. Birds, true birds, already descendants of smaller theropods, join the chorus. Some sing complex songs, filling the morning with sound as intricate as any tropical forest. Today, they are fragile, but they carry within them the future. The dawn that warms their feathers will also warm their descendants long after the age of dinosaurs has ended. The sun climbs higher. Warmth floods the land. With it, the prehistoric world shifts from fragile quiet to vibrant activity. Herds migrate toward water, their footsteps leaving deep prints in soft soil. Pterosaurs soar overhead, their shadows sweeping across the plains like living kites. Crocodilian predators bask at riverbanks, their armored bodies soaking in the heat, patient as stone. Insects scatter before the trampling feet of hadrosaurs. A microcosm of survival beneath the giants. Dawn is also a moment of vulnerability. At watering holes, prey and predator gather, forced into uneasy proximity. A tyrannosaur lowers its massive head to drink, muscles tensed as a dozen hadrosaurs wade carefully nearby. The air is thick with tension. At any moment, the fragile peace can shatter. But often, it doesn't. Predators don't strike at every opportunity. They bide their time, waiting for weakness. The dawn is the moment both sides take their chances. From a human perspective, this daily cycle seems eternal. But we know the truth. The dawn of the Cretaceous was also the dawn of its end. When the great asteroid struck, shattering the balance of Earth, mornings like this would vanish. The skies would darken with ash. The sun's warmth, once the giver of life, would be hidden for months, even years. The very rhythm of dawn, so constant for hundreds of millions of years, would be broken. And yet, in this inevitability, there is hope. The dawn of the new world was not just destruction. It was rebirth. The mammals scurrying back to burrows at daybreak would inherit the earth. The small birds greeting each sunrise with delicate songs would survive and flourish. Even the flowering plants, swaying gently in the early breeze, would spread and dominate, painting the earth in color. The dawn of the dinosaurs was also the dawn of their successors. When we imagine the last Cretaceous morning, it is bittersweet. The herds gather, the predators hunt, the forests bloom, unaware that everything will soon change. But the beauty of that dawn lies not in its end, but in its continuity. Life did not stop with the dinosaurs, it adapted. It carried forward. Every sunrise we see today, every dawn that breaks over our modern world, is linked to those ancient mornings. We are walking beneath the same sun that once cast light over Triceratops' horns, over the wings of pterosaurs, over the scales of Tyrannosaurus rex. The dawn of a new world is not just a chapter in prehistory. It is a reminder that endings are also beginnings. The dinosaurs had their age, their mornings filled with thunder and song. But when their dawn faded, another rose in its place, one that would lead, eventually, to us. And so, as the sun climbs high over the Cretaceous plains, we stand at the threshold of memory and possibility. The dinosaurs greet the day as they always have, with no knowledge of what is to come. But we know. We know that every dawn carries both beauty and fragility. The Cretaceous morning was the last of its kind, yet its light never truly went out. It shines still, carried in the feathers of birds, in the blooming of flowers, in the resilience of life itself. The age of dinosaurs closes, but the sun continues to rise.